The three of us, you may have heard earlier, work in the IBM Z team. So the IBM Z team, the Z stands for zero downtime, and this has been a computing system around since 1964. So it's had various forms of incarnations since then, right? And now the latest models have AI model accelerators inside them for inferencing. They have cards for specific encryption. They've got quantum safe algorithms incorporated in them, right? We're continuously improving these spaces. And as you can imagine, in these large scale mainframes, we really focus on security, we focus on quality. So we've kind of taken a different approach to how we've implemented InnerSource, really, to take it to the next level. So it has a little bit more rigor and structure. And because we've done that, right, we've created so many tools, literally thousands of people working on this for the last 60 years. We're talking a situation where the grandparents and the grandkids could have worked on like the same exact line of code in the system. So we've accrued many, many different tools through the years, hundreds. And it ranges from a simple script to make my life easier in one area to an entire build system or build automation setup. And it can vary between those things. So one of the things we've really been trying to do is adopt inner source paradigms, mold them to fit our processes, procedures, and really make sure that we can gather and utilize the value provided by inner source.
Just making sure you guys can see our screen, right?
Yes.
Yes,
Perfect.
we can see it. Aaron, looks good.
All right, Allison, you want to take us from here?
So yeah, so I think that was a great introduction by Mike on what the Z team is, and Brittany did introduce us all, so that was great. So I think we can skip ahead. We thought it would be a really good idea since, you know, Aaron and Mike presented earlier, we thought it would be a good idea to have more of a fireside type chat today, where we would have some questions and we'll have like an open discussion. We encourage you to post questions as well and to ask questions because we want to, answer anything that's top of mind. We also thought it was a great way to get an insight into our InnerSource team by having more of a fireside chat. So if you want to jump ahead, we did break up. We have a few charts just to put the questions on the screen and have something to look at. Charts weren't absolutely mandatory for this type of session, but we did break them up into 4 different categories. The first category of questions is really focused on, inner source for developers. So if you jump ahead, Aaron, thanks for screen sharing. The first question is really, how do you encourage developers that side project culture could be valuable to the business? So Aaron, do you want to answer this question and take a first pass at it? Because I feel like you have a really good perspective when it comes to side projects.
Sure. And I'll give the whole InnerSource tie-in as well. For me, I would kind of attribute my entire career to side projects. And obviously I have a day job and I do that day job, and that is important as well. But I joined IBM full-time in 2016. And since I've been there, I've really been involved in tooling and automation. And a lot of those things are naturally driven in an InnerSource style. And because of that, as InnerSource became more prevalent to us at IBM, I picked it up pretty quickly personally, and then, really became an advocate for it. And I traversed up the ranks at IBM pretty quickly, fairly, due to those contributions, that tooling, that automation, and showing people, this is what you can do. And then on top of that, sharing with others, right? I belonged to a test group when I first joined IBM. So we have, tests everywhere. So, hey, I wrote this automation suite. You can run it over here. It does X, Y, and Z. Oh, you want me to add A, B, and C? It's pretty easy. So then, kind of after, climbing up the ranks and looking back down, it's easy to show people, hey, this is what I did. It didn't really have a name then, but it is InnerSource by today's standards, right? I participated in this paradigm and this methodology of doing things, and it's greatly benefited my career. So I kind of lead by example and show, hey, this is what I did. This is what it results in. And then same thing with, talks like today, I get to go to conferences and talk to different people about it. So it shows, kind of through example, this is beneficial in this way.
And in addition to honing your skill set using the side projects, right, that are effectively inner source or get inner sourced, I also find that, as a developer, I'm trying to fix a problem that I have a myopic view on for my team. And a lot of times I've run into situations where I'm talking to somebody and like, oh, last week I made this tool that does X, Y, and Z because, I was having an issue. And they're like, oh, I have one of those. I made it last year. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You could have saved me a week's worth of work. And I feel like sometimes developers have trouble seeing the forest through the trees type situation, and providing a inner source portal or a space that you can search for things and find different projects to contribute to or tweak to fit your needs, because you don't really have to start from scratch. You can just tweak a couple lines or make it work in your scenario. There was one project that was inner source. My username happened to be my email address. It wouldn't accept an @ sign. So I had a one-line fix. I was able to use it. They were able to pick it up. And then other people who had the same type of username could use it, right?
Great. That's good responses. Yeah, great. And then if you mind jumping ahead, Aaron, hit 2 clicks. There's 2 questions that are similar and related on what challenges did you face? And then what surprised you when you encourage colleagues to participate in side projects, specifically our InnerSource side project? So you can answer both or one.
I'll give a quick one for both. The challenges was just main one being people that were just unwilling to participate. And through the background of what Mike kind of mentioned, the industry that we belong to has a lot of prestige and, puts a large emphasis on security and not being very vulnerable, right? Not advancing too quickly. We will gladly be second to market if we do it better, right? So with that hesitancy, it was hard to get people to adopt something kind of bleeding edge. But I think what eventually then did surprise me was after giving example after example and starting to pull people, how quickly, people would turn favor, right? As soon as you convince a security expert in the space, you get those heads, kind of in. As soon as you convince someone that I'm not going to break your automation, you get those guys in. Or, even some of the tools that you gain access to by driving some of that work, people want those tools and they want access to those things. And they're like, you know what, I'm willing to give this a try. So it's like, it may be stubborn in the beginning with the challenges, but then as people started to see the benefits, the turnover was fast.
And I usually get questions like, oh, that's going to take too much time, or I don't have any time to do that, or I'm too focused on my day job. So really exemplifying the success stories. Like there was one scenario where we had taken a tool, InnerSource, and it hadn't been updated for a while. The maintainer actually retired, and there was a bug in it. And there was like 4 or 5 people that were able to jump in, modify stuff because it was InnerSource and not locked down in a closed repo somewhere. They were able to figure it out and then ship the fix that was then employed by the organization. So once they started seeing success stories like that, they started to, as they changed their mindset a little bit. So that was one big challenge that we started off with. And then also getting people to know where they start, right, is another big challenge, or saying they don't have time. And I know Aaron has put together a ton of documentation and also literally taken 2 minutes to show them how they can get started in InnerSource and say, here's the 3 check marks to fit into the InnerSource portal, and boom, now it's there. So it really reduces the barrier to entry when you kind of, show instead of tell people what to do.
Yeah, especially kind of going off of that. The I don't have time, I feel like, was a big one. And it's like, well, none of us do. And it's like you give 2 minutes here, you give 2 minutes there, and eventually it'll add up.
Yeah. And I think that was we had a really great group of folks though, that where they could come in and work on a project for a bit and then step away, and then somebody else would be available. So we had quite a big group that I think it allowed that flexibility, which was great. Okay, next question. How do developers know what others are working on or have created?
And for me, this one really comes down to having a searchable place, right? You probably have heard about it before, having an inner source portal. We've done things like create GitHub organizations that would be like, say, Z inner source, so that they could find where things should be if they don't really have a home for a specific item, or even as simple as something as doing GitHub tags, right, is effective.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, remembering the human element of things. I remember, being kind of a newer developer, and we'd have all hands meetings, and we'd have, different things to showcase what's going on in the community. And as a new hire, you're just like, all right, I'm kind of sick of these. Like, they happen every so once in a while, whatever. And you move up the ranks, and you quickly become siloed and disattached sometimes because you're busy with your day job, or you're involved in 5 different things, or you're traveling. So something like that is helpful. So we have kind of added to that and have started throwing showcases and, grabbing a few projects and saying, hey, we want to give these projects time to appreciate what they've done, appreciate the work that they've put in, the time that they've put in, and also kind of say, hey, we've got some cool projects in the community, take a look.
Okay. The next charts. So the next set of charts is really focused on kind of communicating inner source to leadership as well as the rest of our community and business unit. So if you hit one more ahead, how do you implore your organization's leaders to take a project from an idea to their next business decision? So I have some thoughts here, but maybe Aaron and Mike, you want to give more of a technical perspective. But I feel
I
like
was going to make
product
you.
manager, you're going to make me answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say for this one, and I think this is similar to a lot of different organizations and companies, that they have very formal processes for product management. There's several reviews when it comes to bringing things to market or deciding if you want to bring a new product to market or if you're going to productize it. So we've learned through inner sourcing in this team and going through from inner source to open source and some of the projects that Aaron and Mike have done and led, the value of working with product management, going through the market research, going through the business case, and really evaluating what's out there in the market today, as well as how does this compare or complement what's going on in our portfolio, in our space, and what makes sense as a business. And so through that those projects and like the formal processes we followed and that are put in place for product management, a lot of times we will take these to our leaders in the different organizations, and we'll connect where maybe certain inner source projects align to certain pillars of our business, and we'll go and present those projects to those leaders, and we'll get their buy-in. We've also developed, I would say, good relationships with a lot of executives at different levels, technical executives and product management executives, that have helped ease a lot of those conversations and finding where is the right place. Because sometimes you may have an idea of where a project should be presented to business leaders, but it might not be the right leader to make the decision on what we want to do with that project. So having a lot of leaders at the different levels and on both sides of product and technical have really helped us in getting the word out about InnerSource, what we're trying to do, and really connecting when it's time to make that right business decision. So yeah, that's been the fun part of what I've really enjoyed about this project. And to Aaron and Mike, do you want to add anything if I missed anything?
Oh, I was going to say I'm going to put in my 2 cents and then kind of quickly pitch it to Mike. The reason that I wanted Allison to answer is that, I'm probably the least polished of the three of us when it comes to this realm. I'm kind of your traditional, runs rogue and has a lot of proof of concepts in a more formal sense. So, as it pertains to going up the stack and having to talk to these executives and talk to these different components, I was very unpolished in that space. And something like InnerSource really gave me the opportunity to look at ourselves as like a team. And it was one of the big areas that I leaned on Allison a lot to say, hey, this is your domain. I don't really understand it too much. Kind of take over.
What comes to mind is the actions speak louder than words type of idiom, that there has been success cases already from IBM where we had InnerSource incorporated into products, to become open source. So we have some real tangible items that we kind of showcase and say, these things work. These are paradigms that really do work. And in addition to that, there's potential for deduplication of tooling, for sharing success, increasing productivity, right? Taking a client zero approach. So now, if we're trying to work on something to solve our own problem, most likely our clients are going to experience the similar problem, or someone else will. And we can start to understand what other areas of the business can provide feedback in their area, provide testing in that area, and then eventually say, okay, it's generalized enough and stable enough for us to say productize and go out to help our clients. So those types of productivity improvements and values really ring true with the executive business side of things. So, if you do have some success stories, even if it's outside of your company, I think sharing those stories, sharing the potential value of all these things, even if you save a couple hours a week of duplication efforts. I know Aaron has an InnerSource project that the firmware team uses, the testing teams use, right? And it's being incorporated in broader automation now. And before that, it was just him stumping around and saying, hey, do you need something like this? Do you need something like this? Instead of other teams going to the portal and looking for stuff and saying, oh, this does what I need. Let me go talk to the maintainer, right? And modifying just a couple little things.
Great. And then we somewhat touched upon this question, but maybe there's additional thoughts you may have, is how do we incentivize the InnerSource culture? And this isn't
yeah, I would say I have a different answer for this one, because I think, as I mentioned before, it was more from the grassroots oriented manner. But I think more recently, through partnering with some of those executives and those higher level folks that Allison mentioned, we've been able to put on some pretty cool events, right? I know in the main room we spoke about Hacktoberfest and some of the stuff that goes on there. And we're giving out t-shirts and hats and stickers and whatnot for people's participation. But then again, even just seeing, and this sounds so weird for me, being now considered a senior leader in our area, but seeing interns and seeing new hires come up and say, hey, do you have something I could work on, or how do I get involved, or can I start a project? For instance, I gave a talk on InnerSource at IBM, and then afterwards, talked to one of our new hires, and I was like, hey, I actually have like an AI idea. If you want to run it as an InnerSource project, I can help you. I can, kind of push that for you. And it becomes, what's the word I'm looking for? It becomes career boosting, right, for them in a certain sense. So, several different ways. They're, giving away swag as a part of an event, helping to prop up their career in an area they're already working in. As Mike mentioned before, hey, I'm going to be working on a tool that may benefit your team as well. Is there something that you want me to do while I'm looking at this? Right. And then, vice versa. They're going to say, hey, this is super useful. Can you do X? And then that time you're like, no, I'm kind of busy, but just go look at it. You can make a contribution yourself.
Right. And we do have a bounty program that we use for various features of different things, right? Whether it's an InnerSource project or not, right? So, like an internal points reward type system. And that certainly helps a little bit there. Most people actually don't do it for that incentive. They're always like looking for a new skill to learn or something to contribute to. So a lot of times as a leader and a mentor, I'm usually asking questions like, if they created something, have you InnerSourced it yet? Right? Or, oh, this other team could probably benefit from this, InnerSource it, and then go talk to this team. I'll set up the connection. Or even from the standpoint where I'm like, hey, what do you want to learn? Like, what do most people right now are saying, I want to learn agentic AI, or I want to learn something like that. And working on an inner source project that's in that space is a perfect opportunity to grow those skills in a safe spot, a place where you don't really have to start from scratch. You can kind of jump in and contribute smaller things, understand how it works at large instead of going out and reading, say, Medium articles to kind of figure it out yourself. And one thing I've seen instituted in our area specifically is on promotional packages and things like that. They ask the question, what open source and what inner source have you contributed to? Right. So I think that really was a game changer to get it incorporated into that level of promotions and reward cycles to say, how are you helping the business through other mechanisms, right? And traditionally you would list side projects, right, that you worked on. Oh, I helped this other team, but you're really saying like, I worked on this inner source project that 50 other teams have contributed to. It's a bigger statement and a bigger impact.
Yeah, all good points. Okay, so let's talk about inner source best practices. I'm gonna jump ahead. How can we provide consistency and experiences across inner source projects? This is a good question.
I kind of wish Chris was here. This is a great question for him. We've done a significant amount of work in putting out project templates and project patterns that, for instance, Chris, who I was speaking about a second ago, was working on an application in Next.js, but he needed to get it working with our SSO as well. And I don't know, it probably took him a couple of weeks, 3 weeks to do so. It's just a typical part of your development process. And then, kind of went on working in his normal project, and then eventually got to the point where he was like, that piece in itself is really useful and is something that other people could use. So if you're using, or if you're trying to start a Next.js based application that needs SSO authentication, this is the base. This is the project template that you need to start from, right? And then you can just add on, because we have additional files like how to get started, a contributing.md, a code of conduct. You just have all of those files in there as a template, and you say, hey, this template as is InnerSource compliant, is InnerSource, as we want it to be. Just take this and start your project from there. So, doing things like that, and then enforcing, language technology stacks and saying, hey, I had a conversation with someone today where I was using pipenv because it was better than me using pip. And now UV has come about, and now I'm switching everything to UV and telling people to switch their stuff to UV, and putting out content and documentation of how to switch to UV, right? It just makes it easier for people to say, all right, somebody is trying to forge the way, let me just follow.
And in fact, the project that Aaron was just talking about, one of the other IBMers came up to us during the lunch break, and he actually contributed to that inner source project and said that it saved him a ton of time being able to reuse that template, because he would have had to reinvent that himself, which I thought was a perfect testament to it. I think templates are definitely a key. Project starter kits, even like AI agents and stuff like that. Do we really want someone to start from scratch, or do we want someone to start from a nice base that has reviewed and approved, say, open source imports and models and things like that? So I'm a big proponent of providing project templates in various languages in addition to the inner source templates, right? To really make sure we have that consistency, and even build pipelines. If I have to use Travis or Jenkins in various projects differently, I have to increase my skills at some point. Versus if we have a standard Jenkins pipeline that does all of the standard static code analysis tools and things like that, I can just replicate and add to it so that it's a little bit easier to jump from project to project, instead of saying, here's 2 files, and they're 10,000 lines each. There's not a comment to be seen. Good luck to you. Right? Making sure you have those contributing guidelines, the getting started, the readmes are really important and effective.
Mike, I'm so glad you shared that story about how someone came up to you and mentioned that they contributed and it saved them so much time, because I feel like that is one of the core reasons and values of InnerSource, and something that, Aaron, I remember you kind of did when you were recruiting me to join the team and be part of this project and help. out. I remember that was like the one thing you said to me, like this was the potential of InnerSource to help save time, information share. And that is just like that's a great story. And I feel like that's like the crux of why I wanted to be part of this team and contribute and be part of this project. So that's really cool to hear you say that. It's like full circle moment. Okay. Okay, so I think we covered all the questions on this chart. The next chart is really focusing on the benefits of InnerSource, which Mike touched upon one of the key benefits. But how has InnerSource been utilized to upskill?
Like Aaron said, he's done a ton of different side projects to keep current, to learn new skills. And I've done the same over the last 15 years, just constantly creating automation, exploring new tools that I could use. Even if I knew how to do it in Python, I might choose JavaScript to pick up those skills. And I find that a lot of the newer hires, the early tenure folks contributing to some of the InnerSource projects that I've seen are doing it to kind of expand their skill set. So I actually had an InnerSource project that a couple of people worked on. They had never done UI design before. They had never done JavaScript. So I had kind of coached them through the process. We created the tool, we deployed it. Everything is great. And then they're like, I'm leaving my current job to go do this full time. I love doing UI work, right? And you're like, this is awesome. You found what you love because of an InnerSource project. And now they're a UI coder instead of a backend coder, right? And coming out of college, they didn't know what they wanted to do besides have a job. So an InnerSource experience literally helped them kind of carve their future career and learn the skills that they needed. And now they're the lead UI person on 2 products.
Yeah, I mean, to follow that up, I think I referenced giving a project to a new hire earlier, after a talk I gave, and we met a month ago and we met 2 days ago. And a month ago, I kind of showed her the beginning of what I had. And, it was a little all over the place. The code worked, populated a database with some information. And the whole idea behind it was to eventually connect it to an MCP server, have it chat and, build an agent. And the first time around, you show her everything and she's like, I want to get into this, but I don't understand. Right. And it's like, listen, I will do my best to get the foundation to a place where it's documented, it's great, and it's readable. I'll get you some tutorials, all this stuff. And I work on that alongside of her starting to learn the repo and whatnot. And I met with her yesterday, and I was so nervous going into the meeting because I'm just like, I'm going to show her everything that I've cleaned up and have provided, but I'm not sure if it's still going to click. And she came in and she was firing on all cylinders. And she's like, hey, just so you know, I went through the tutorials. It makes so much sense. Like, I kind of have an understanding of how LLMs work. I have an understanding of how the agents work. I understand why it needs to like link up to the database and all this stuff. And I'm like, here I was ready to speak for 30 minutes. And it's like, all right, we're done here. Right. So, in a month, she was able to kind of take, an InnerSource project that I had started and didn't have the time to put into and, gave it away. And she's like, I'm really, really starting to delve into learning AI now and how it all works behind the scenes versus just being a pure consumer.
Yeah. I also want to touch upon too, like the community. Well, I guess this is kind of leading to the next question. So let me save it for the next question. What assistance is there?
Well, no, why don't you just start us off?
Okay. So the one thing I wanted to comment about, it's kind of related to skill and professional development that InnerSource provides, which is what you all touched upon and more. But then the community as well, I feel like the great thing about it is even if you don't immediately pivot into a new role or realize you want to, kind of work on another type of project full time, I still think like the connections that you make are something that you can benefit from long term. The people in the InnerSource community, the people on our team, you might stay in your role or you might just do this as a side project for now, but I feel like you always have the opportunity and those connections to tap on those folks long term if you in a couple of years if you needed it, to either learn more or find new roles, things like that. So I think there's that long-term benefit. that you will eventually experience being part of this community and participating in like an InnerSource side project. So just wanted to kind of point that out. And then if you have anything you want to add, Aaron and Mike.
For assistance, I mean, things like today, the InnerSource Summit has been very eye-opening to what's going on at other companies with some of this. And then, for us, Mike alluded to it earlier, but just providing a ton of documentation and things of the like of saying, hey, these things exist out there. Let's not reinvent the wheel. The InnerSource Commons has a lot of video content and documentation in that area. I know for ourselves, one of the things that we pride ourselves on the Z team is providing, additional documentation and advisory group to go talk to. In some cases, the templates and pipelines and things like that are things we're working on, and even programmatic assistance. We're trying ourselves to write more code to help assist people as they join our community. And I think that's something I'd implore others to do as well.
And being mindful of time, we have 2 minutes. So Brittany, I hope we have time to address 1 or 2 questions. Maybe we can post both questions up on the screen there, Aaron. But the last 2 questions we have are, what are some success stories realized adopting InnerSource culture, and how can InnerSource increase the org security posture? So.
Yeah, I think we've
Mike.
sprinkled a bunch of different success stories throughout the conversation so far. And to touch upon the security posture, making sure we have templates and automation and things like that we're imploring people to use as they InnerSource things has really opened up various communication venues. So as I'm helping folks InnerSource, I'm also, as a security expert, helping them do a security review. So providing the basic configurations, the guidelines and things that they should be following is helpful. And the same goes for like levels of quality or enterprise grade content, or just tips and tricks on formatting. We used to have a lot of people create things and like one person would use React, one person would use Angular, another person would use vanilla JavaScript, right? And it's hard to move between projects at that point. So we started providing more recommended tech stacks. Here's like the latest and greatest. These things are compatible with each other. They're approved for use. Here's what I recommend starting with.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'll just gonna say ditto, because the only piece I have to add on top of that is like it is really good when you have a thriving community in that space, because there are a lot of times where people just don't know, right? So to just be able to quickly be like, hey, I would do X rather than Y, or for somebody else to be like, why are you doing this? And you'd be like, didn't know that existed,